Hello there, welcome to part 2 of this Italeri Sea Hurricane build. We are now ready to put our engine together. I have already cut and cleaned most of the parts required. There is just one last part that needs to be cut and cleaned, this part here. But let me just pause here and congratulate Italeri. See this sprue? The numbers go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and so on. The numbers are in order. Now this may seem like a small thing, but for some inexplicable reason, almost all kit makers place numbers on sprues randomly. I must admit, searching for numbers on randomly numbered sprues is not something I enjoy terribly, and I find it a complete waste of time. So well done Italeri for getting the numbering right. Moving on, let's cut and clean this part and glue the engine together. With the engine glued, it's time to give it a black coat. I will now hand paint some details on the engine. I will be using medium grey and a fine brush. I am simply painting the pipes and wires in the colors I think will look nice. Alternately, you can look up some pictures on the net and try and be more accurate. It's up to you. Next, some dry brushing. I am using Revell's aluminium. This helps bring out the surface details and gives the engine more definition and depth. I have clipped the bristles of this brush and I use it only for dry brushing. Just load the brush with paint and then wipe it clean. And when I say clean, I mean wipe it absolutely clean, till it's almost free of paint. And then you can dry brush with it. The only way you can ruin a dry brush job is by leaving too much paint on the brush and end up painting the part rather than giving it a slight hint of paint on its edges and raised details. So do be careful and don't overdo it. I am painting this little drum on this piece with brass paint. I am using AK True Metal. This will break the monotony of the black and add an interesting element. Let's now move on to the exhausts. I want the exhausts not only to have rust color but also a corroded texture. I start by deliberately airbrushing a patchy layer of rust paint. I will be using these rust pigments from Vallejo and AK's pigment fixer. I use a double-sided brush for this, one side to dab the pigment on with and the other for the fixer. I will first dab on this reddish brown rust pigment on the piece. Next, I highlight some parts with this light yellow rust. I don't have any black pigment, so let me show you how to make some pigments using pastels. I scrub some black pastel off into fine dust. You can even use a sanding paper or stick to do this. I then proceed exactly the same way as earlier. By the way, if you don't have pigment fixer, use turpentine. It works just fine. All done. I like the way the exhausts have come out. A little bit of rust is added to the engine too, along the part where the exhaust fits. We don't want a clean line between the engine block and the rusty exhausts. Well, that's the engine done. Time to glue it all together and then glue it to the fuselage. Next, it's time to glue the fuselage halves. I first tape the halves together and then apply Tamiya extra thin, always keeping well away from the tape. This is important. If you get too close to the tape, the cement will run along it due to capillary action and onto the face of the kit, ruining it. So please be careful and deliberate. I am very impressed with the Italeri kit. Even with so many parts and these large fuselage halves, the fit is excellent. On to the wings, starting with the wheel well. I will follow the exact same painting process as the cockpit. First a black base, then the pale green. Seal everything up with varnish and then a panel line wash. The ailerons come in two halves and we need to glue these together before we glue the wings. Now to glue the top halves in. When gluing large parts like these wings, I try to move in stages, lining up the two halves and then applying glue to a particular section. Once this glue is half set, I move along the joint, adding some more glue and lining up that part. This way I get the two halves lined up as accurately as possible. Also, since I know the sections where I have applied the glue, it's easier to avoid getting glue on my fingers and then leaving fingerprints on parts or just generally causing a mess. Now to clean up the wings. I will be using Tamiya sanding sponges for this. You can use anything that is soft and can bend around the wings edges. A soft sanding sponge or paper helps avoid leaving unnatural flat spots on the wings. I start with a coarse 240 grit sanding sponge and work my way up to a 1200 grit. Finally, a polishing stick for the finish. In case I lose some surface detail, I use these mini photo etch saws to restore them. Now to glue the wings and the fuselage together. The inside of the air intake needs to be painted black and then given a dry brushing before we can glue them. Right, now finally in preparation for the painting, we need to mask the parts we have already painted. Well, that's all for now, fellow modelers. Next time, we will start with painting this beautiful kit. Thanks a ton for watching. Make sure you catch the next part. Till then, good luck and happy modeling.